In 2006, two high schoolers picked up a camcorder and started filming what they believed would be their masterpiece. They were meticulously documenting their plan to become famous serial killers. They wanted to be remembered in history. But within hours of committing their first actual murder, the boys took this tape, the very manifesto they created to ensure their fame, and buried it in the dirt. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik were average teenagers walking these halls. Below the surface, though, they were obsessed with 90s slasher films, and they decided to pull those fictional tropes into the real world. Documenting a crime for fame, but destroying the evidence in a panic, suggests a total breakdown between the fantasy they scripted and the gravity of what they had actually done. The reality began on September 22, 2006. 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was house-sitting a large suburban home. By 11 p.m., her friends had left and she was entirely alone. Earlier that evening, Brian and Torey had quietly unlocked a basement door before leaving the house to establish an alibi. They crept back inside, slipped on masks, cut the power at the breaker box, and waited in the basement. Cassie sat upstairs in pitch black. She heard the lights flicking on and off, and loud crashes coming from the lower floor. She thought the house was simply settling, unaware she had been cast in a manufactured horror scenario. Treating a real person's life as a disposable movie prop shows how disconnected these teenagers had become from the world around them. 4 days later, the cinematic illusion collapsed. Brian and Torey sat across from detectives inside a claustrophobic, high-pressure interrogation room. They arrived with a prepared script. Both boys confidently told police they had left Cassie's house early to catch a movie at the local theater, placing them miles away at the time of the murder. Detectives immediately picked the timeline apart. Neither boy could accurately describe the plot of the film they supposedly watched, and neighborhood witnesses had already spotted their car parked near the crime scene. Cornered, the teens scrambled. They pivoted to a backup lie, admitting they were parked in the neighborhood, but falsely claiming they were only there checking door handles to burglarize cars. These rapidly shifting, easily disproven stories exposed the glaring hole in their design. They spent weeks plotting a murder, but neglected to plan a single step for the aftermath, a lack of foresight often seen in impulsive juvenile offenders. To understand why they could script a crime but fail so spectacularly at covering it up, we have to look at the neurology of the teenage brain, specifically the frontal lobe. This is the brain's control center. It's responsible for processing long-term consequences and evaluating risks, systems that don't finish developing until our mid-20s. During adolescence, this region is still maturing. This can make teenagers more susceptible to prioritizing immediate emotional thrills over rational, long-term planning. This biological vulnerability often interacts with other risk factors. Researchers in this case point to deeply rooted antisocial views, unstable family relationships, and a separation from social norms as precursors to criminal activity. For Brian and Torey, these factors converged. They had the focus required to buy weapons and write a script, but their ability to process the actual consequences of their actions was severely underdeveloped. In their minds, they were following a movie logic, where they were the invulnerable protagonists. They didn't have the perspective yet to realize real-world violence doesn't come with a reset button. The breaking point arrived deep into the interrogation. The psychological pressure finally fractured Brian's resolve, and he let police out to a remote patch of wilderness called Black Rock Canyon. Digging into the dirt, investigators unearthed the physical evidence: dark clothing, hunting knives, partially melted masks, and the buried videotape. When police watched the recovered footage, they found the immediate aftermath of the crime. Both boys appeared breathless and agitated, remarking that the killing they had just carried out didn't even feel real. That footage captures the exact moment their cinematic fantasy collided with an actual homicide. The murder was intended to be the glorious debut of their infamy, but once the script ended and the blood became real, the cinematic distance they had maintained evaporated. The adrenaline dropped, replaced by panic. The weight of what they had done triggered an illogical need to rewind reality by burning the evidence, as if they could erase the murder as easily as a scene in a movie. It shows how thin the boundary can be between morbid teenage ideation and devastating violence. They set out to direct a horror movie, but ended up as terrified kids burying their mistakes in the dirt. The most unsettling mysteries aren't found in scripts. They reside in the unpredictable ways the developing human mind can lose its grip on what is real.